host, Ariel Myers, and today I have a little bit of a blast from the past with my teachers and mentors, Lorie Eve Dechar and Benjamin Fox, who I love so much. This was probably my most personal podcast interview to date. I worked with Lorie and Benjamin for over 5 years, so they were active participants in, but also witnesses to my process of becoming more intentional in my work as a fertility healer. In this episode, we talk about bringing ourselves fully into our relationships and into our connection with ourself and our own inner world. We talk about pleasure activism, the activism of Wu Wei, of radical commitment to rest. We begin the conversation about gender dynamics and astrology. It was deeply meaningful and joyful to talk with Lorie and Benjamin again. I love them dearly, and I know that this work that I'm doing probably wouldn't be happening if not for the work that I did with them. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hello.
Hey, Ariel.
Oh, it's so good to see your guys' faces and hear your voices.
It's so great to see you. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
it's
good to see you.
It's so good to see you guys. I wanted to tell the listeners. So it's interesting, when I started recording these, I kind of thought that it was going to be about fertility and the feminine and like all things related to the feminine as I see it. And I realized since I've recorded like 5 so far, and I've come to understand that I think it's more a podcast about relationships.
Oh, wow. Okay. Good.
So, yeah, which includes all of those things. But on that note, I wanted to, I guess, give the listener an idea about how I see you guys and who you've both been in my life before we kind of go into like who you are professionally and all of that stuff. So if you're okay with that. Yeah.
I love that.
Lorie.
Yes.
I'm
yes.
good.
Okay. So I actually love when I get introduced on that level. The professional is like secondary. So I love that you're going to start with the juicy stuff.
Yeah.
Good.
So I don't know actually like how much you guys remember of me from that time, but I guess it was, I think like 7 years ago at this point, because I was still living in Hoboken. I had my wellness center, my fertility wellness center, which was going well. I think my kids were little, so maybe like 3 and 5.
You had
4 and 6.
You had a whole line of products as well that you were selling.
Had my product line, yeah. So, and like my nice home and my relatively okay marriage, and I still felt a feeling of like, well, it was kind of twofold, because it was like an awareness of all these things that I felt like I should be grateful for, and that I kind of had been, I guess, guided my whole life into believing would like make me happy if I achieved these goals. And then I kind of achieved them and felt both like guilty for not feeling fulfilled and also like aware that I was not fulfilled. But not really sure what like the missing piece was. And then I think on one of our like acupuncture Facebook groups, another woman I went to school with who took your program or went through your program, I'm not sure like how much she had done at the time, posted something, and I don't remember what about it resonated, but it resonated luckily. And I went to your, I think it was your introduction to alchemical healing, and then spent the next like, I think 4 years with you both, right? Like on maybe a few weekends throughout the year, on and off.
Yes.
And so I like kind of, I found myself wanting to come to like and now this, like, and so I actually did write something down that I want to share.
And you were still working with us in New York after you moved to Boulder as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, and you've been out there, how many years?
It's been just about exactly 5 years. So I remember the
Wow,
first year.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing.
The
Yeah,
first
because
year I
I
felt like
do
I was
remember.
like I feel like the first few seasons, because the first year we were still doing it seasonally, where you were having like a meetup during each element. I'm not sure if you're still doing that. And I think almost a full year in is when I moved.
Yeah.
And I do think I like managed the move mostly because of the work we had done up until then. Like I feel like it was good. But so yeah, I was curious before I like read you what I wrote down. I actually wrote it down because I was like, what is like the thing that I like have come to? But I was curious, like you have your books, you have your private practices, I think still you have your coursework, your programs, and now you have this community that you're leading or holding. And so I'm wondering, is there like a thing that you're like, do you know what I mean? Like even the languages around it is like not right, like the goal, but like how would you define, I guess, your purpose for what you're doing, all of it?
So I love, Ariel, that you come right in with that Aries fire spirit. I love that. And of course, I think we can both answer separately and together. Benjamin, maybe you want to jump in and then I will.
Sure. So the question is, what's the underlying purpose to all that we're doing? Is that, yeah. So I would go back to the very first day when I had the insight to start a new possibility, which was, I don't even know, so many years ago. We talk about it in the book. But I got clear that the work that we were doing in our life was about looking at a person's life and trying to find insight into where the impasse was and how someone could move through that impasse and discover a new possibility for themselves and for their life. And I would say that that is what Lorie's doing. It's what I get really lit up about, you know, using the astrology chart. And I think I would say that's still the underlying thrust of the work. Lorie, would you say something?
I love how you, you kind of honed in on the central piece. You could say the entelechy of what we're up to, like the arising in both of us, which is this excitement about opening that conduit for Tao or for the divine or for spirit to infuse a person's life. And I think the only thing I would add to what you said there, Benjamin, is that I think for both of us, that's very personal. It's personal for us, our relationship, the people we work with, but it's also for me been an ongoing sort of driving desire to support that in consciousness as a whole. In the collective, it's us each, but it's also that I feel, and of course, we always look at this issue of how dualism, how our impasse in patriarchal kind of oppositional thinking may be actually a symptom of what's attempting to come to life for human beings as a whole. So we could say the transformation of consciousness and how each of us are playing a part in that, and how holistic medicine, Chinese medicine, the healing modalities are also part of that. I think that gets at it if you want an elevator speech. And then we could go on.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in there that I'm like, ooh, like I want to. But the one thing that you said that I feel like really shifted in me is you said that it's ongoing. And I think that was the first thing, was like, there's not necessarily a goal. I mean, yeah, like the greater goal for all of humanity to be in a better place, but it's like, I think we live in a kind of linear place where we're like, there's an end goal where we will have achieved happiness or some, or whatever the goal is. But really it's like the ongoing connection to either self and or this bigger consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I don't.
go ahead. Yeah.
I don't think it does end. I mean, hopefully it doesn't end. Like, hopefully it's ongoing throughout our life. I mean, I think consciousness is what we're talking about. Like, is our consciousness evolving in some way? Are we knowing ourselves more deeply? Are we understanding our place within the cosmos? You know, certainly within the environment that we live in, the world we live in, the family of beings we live with. You know, do we know our place within that? And I don't know, for me, I keep bumping up against places where I can have more consciousness. So it's ongoing work. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll read you what I wrote, because kind of what you said is similar to what I wrote. So it's like, and now, so in all the areas of my life, it feels like my career and my relationships with each of my people and with nature and with myself, I am engaged with and committed to my inner world and inner experience, and view each relationship as an opportunity to deepen into myself and into connection, fully trusting the unfolding.
Oh, that actually
It's beautiful.
really, it moves me, especially knowing what you, what you endured, actually.
Yeah.
So what you were willing to, what you didn't give up on in order to open to that.
Well, when I came in, like every time, so Lorie and Benjamin would guide these like inner sensing, where we would go inward. And as soon as I went inward, I would like burst into tears. Like I had no tolerance for any kind of like discomfort, or like not even knowing what was in there was like really unbearable. And so just the learning to sit with it and be with it. And, I think we go through our whole life, like, or I did at least, as soon as I felt a discomfort or something that I didn't recognize or something unfamiliar, it was like, all right, what do we do to bypass that? Like eat or, whatever it is. And it's like, oh, the work is in the sitting with whatever that is.
Yes. Well, that's why we call it alchemy. It's like the work is in with the lead, with the part that we would want to get rid of. Actually, those places are the entry points to discovering spirit, to discovering that goal. But it's not always, as you said, it's certainly not easy. But I think those of us who engage in it, the rewards and the aliveness and the vitality is worth, some of the work that it takes.
Right. Like the alternative to doing it becomes impossible. So I do have your
becomes less and less appealing. Yeah.
and I want to say, Ariel, it's amazing to hear you read that statement as almost like a manifesto of, for your life at this point. It's beautiful to hear you say that. And I know from witnessing you and watching you from afar that you're actually doing it. Like it's not, they're not just empty words, you're living it, you're doing it. I can tell from your work and from what you're up to on Facebook and Instagram and what I see. So
thank you.
Yeah, and that's like the biggest thrill, really, truly, of what we do. Is, it's like when we say in Taoism, that each person at the moment of conception, we're given that bit of starlight. When the sperm and the egg meet, down comes this starlight. And that's, our Tao, that's who we are. And then to have the privilege, of working with people and watching that starlight, come out it's the greatest thrill for me, and you have so done that, truly. I mean, really, we look at your, you know, different posts, and we just smile, and you know, it's really like you're doing you in a beautiful way.
Well, I feel like you guys reminded me, your work reminded me that like life is mad, and even just the way you talk about it, it's like the starlight. And I think, you know, I feel like most of us probably, or at least myself, were raised in a time where like there was nothing magical or mystical about life. It was like hardship and struggle, and almost like that's what gave it meaning and purpose, was to like work hard so that you have the goal at the end. And it's like just to remember that life is supposed to be pleasurable and magical. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to kind of drive home, like in my fertility work. And it's like, let's bring the pleasure back, you know. And I had the perfect kind of, I feel like for me, I had like the fertility as like the thing that it fit perfectly in. But you guys really work with people of all, like across the board, like different kinds of healers, but also not just healers now, right? Like in the group, it's just people who can bring this kind of I guess, is it like a framework you would call it, or just like a inner knowing to whatever they're doing, even if it's, you know, architecture, whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely.
It's an attitude, it's an approach. Yeah, it's an attitude, it's an approach, it's a philosophy, it's a way of holding our life, for sure. And we are working
a set of skills that support all that you said, Benjamin. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did want to read, I have your book here, which I want to ask you guys about, but you say it quite beautifully. Alchemical Healing, which is kind of what you're up to and what I'm up to now, begins with the premise that every symptom is a signpost along the path of Tao, and every treatment is an invitation to know the self more deeply. Right. So instead of living in a world where we see symptoms as things to just push away and erase, it's really recognizing it as an invitation. And so I have both of your books here. I don't have Kigo. 5 Spirits.
Great.
And Lorie, and then
it's great.
Benjamin and Lorie wrote this one together, The Alchemy of Inner Work. And so a guide for turning illness and suffering into true health and well-being. So you spoke about the process of it here, but were you guys intending to like co-author a book together, or was it just a natural unfolding of your working together for so many years?
Lorie, do you want to feel that, or
you start?
Lorie started working on that book very shortly after 5 Spirits was published, and that was published in January 2006, 5 Spirits. But Lorie started working on that book, and then lots of life happened and got in the way of your completing it readily. But when it was finally at the point where it was ready to be published, they wanted it to be accessible to a broader audience. And at that point, that was the point that Lorie said, Benjamin, come in and help me edit this in such a way that, you know, more people will be able to really relate to what we're trying to do here. And that's when I joined her and started working. I mean, I had been developing with Lorie through the mentorship, the material in that book for the past 10, 12 years at the time when we were writing it. So it was all very familiar to me, and it was perfect that I should step in and help edit the material.
I think by the time that the Peter at Red Wheel Weiser, our editor, he saw the manuscript and he wrote to me and he said, you know, there's like 2 or 3 books in this manuscript. And what I want is a book that's for a general readers. And I knew, you know, my teaching had been so much to acupuncturists and practitioners. And, you know, Benjamin's always been the person who helps me translate what I think in my sort of mad, crazy wanderings through the infinite into, okay, like he'll always say, okay, how does this look in a person's life?
Mm-hmm.
How can someone use this? How do I make this real? He always, as you know, he'd even do it in the mentorships, you know, it's like, okay, Lorie, come down, come down. So I really knew that without him, I couldn't bring this into a form that would be accessible, not just to practitioners or people already versed in Chinese medicine, but anyone who really wants to take their own inner work, their journey and their healing process and their transformation seriously. And so we started working on it together. And it took us about 1.5 years, right, of work together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that, of course, talk about relationship work.
Yeah, so I didn't even name that. So Lorie and Benjamin are married. And also, oh, that's one of the things that I really appreciated about you. And I wanted to kind of speak to you because it's kind of informed. I'm not seeing patients now, but I have this really clear idea of what I don't want to do when I go back to see patients. And it's been informed by your guys working together and the way that you would teach in all of like the classes. And even when I would go see a healer or even take a yoga class, there was a sense of it being like whoever was teaching was kind of outside of the relationship. I don't even know how to put it, but it was almost like I'm going to withhold myself so that this teaching or whatever I'm sharing is like, I don't know, professional, or I don't even know how to word it, because you guys were always professional, but you always really brought yourself, like not like a persona, it didn't seem like, or like a curated version of yourself, but like, you know, you would sometimes bicker in front of us and I'd be like, oh, like, not only is it like okay, but it's like it helps us see the realness of like you as not just, you know, magical spiritual healers and leaders, you know, and guides, but like you're human. And it feels like, you know, I found myself in my practice really like holding myself outside of the treatment room. And it was actually comfortable for me to do in personal relationships to hold a little bit back, you know, and I didn't see it as like better than or like above, but it was just like a little bit like, I'm not going to be fully invested in this or my own self, you know, like I'm invested in your healing, but it's safe for me in a way. So I'm curious, like, does that make sense to you? And also, was that like a conscious decision you guys like talked about and made to be like engaged as true people, like humans versus like mentors, you know? Part of the mentorship. That was a long-winded kind of
that's a very right on question. Again, Benjamin, I'm going to let you start.
No, I think it's one, Lorie, you should speak first too, and then I'll respond. Okay. I want you to go first. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I will come back in and say it is slightly curated. What we show is slightly curated because you might not want to see the real chaos and messiness of some of the process that it takes. You know, although you know, and we know, now what alchemy in a relationship does take. It's not easy. It is not easy. But again, you know, it's so worth it. Like I can't even imagine being in a relationship. And I think that's what a lot of people come out of the mentorship with, that understanding that like the aliveness of being in a field that is moving, and that can include hard feelings and all kinds of emotions. And we learn to contain those and stay in and, you know, let the vessel crack and then come back to the vessel and, you know, let it crack again and repair and hold. And, you know, I think even that image of the Japanese pottery kintsugi, which we often use, which is these broken vessels that are mended with gold. So I think the relationship field is very much kintsugi for me. You know, it's a vessel that needs to be able to crack in order to keep its aliveness, you know. I think that the process for us around how our style is ongoing. It's ongoing. It's because there is always, as you say, this dance between I'm in this too, and yet I'm also holding process for all of the people in the group or for my patients. And from an alchemical perspective, if I'm not also growing and learning and being at my edge, you know, it's not going to be really happening for anybody else. So I think Benjamin, even writing the book, you know, there were questions about where do we go? How much opening do we do here? Where do those openings come? Yeah.
How much of our story and how much of our individual story and our story as a couple do we reveal? Definitely, those were big considerations when we wrote the book. And just like you said, Ariel, I mean, when you're holding healing space for another person or a group of people, like what you share, I mean, it is a privileged position in a sense, you know. The person you're serving is projecting something onto you, and that was a big learning kind of edge for me. I think when we started the mentorship years and years ago, I didn't have a whole lot of experience teaching, and I learned how to hold space for a group of people in a particular way, but also to never, like you said, I could never leave my humanity out of the circle. I mean, it's just not my style. And I'm not particularly drawn to teachers who teach that way. You know, I'm much more interested in being in relationship to people who are human. Yeah. And there's still like a fine line of like, how much do I reveal? How much do I give away? Or what boundaries do I hold in order to serve the process that you were in, or, you know, somebody that's coming to you for treatment is in? You know, there's certain things they don't want to know or don't need to know or probably shouldn't know. Yeah. So it's ongoing and it's evolving.
Yes. Yeah. But it's a beautiful question, and I think very much a question of a very alchemical question, because, you know, when we talk about relationship, we're talking about that fire, that heat, that is the engine of transformation. And if I'm not in it with my patient or with my students or with my partner, you know, if I'm not in that heat isn't there, then transformation isn't going to happen.
Yeah,
I think that is. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's kind of up for me, because I'm aware that, like, I kind of recently decided that I'm not a healer. Like, I don't want to be a healer because it felt kind of like me doing something. So if I do go back into that work, you know, now I'm kind of teaching and creating courses and, you know, products and stuff. But if I do go back to one-on-one work or even group work, it would be for like empowering, not me doing. Even that, I'm like, I want to find the different name for it, because me healing is not what I want to do anymore. It's like holding space in which people can heal themselves or
beautiful
empower themselves.
I love that. And that's a conversation that's been coming up in our community as well, like through the platform, through the monthly Zoom meetings. And do we call ourselves Are we people who are holding space for other people to do healing work? And not everyone can hold space effectively for others to do healing work. So I don't want to minimize what we're doing in there. I think it's a real art and skill to hold space for that process. You know, there are skills involved.
Right.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that made me, I mean, so I did want to ask you about the community, because you created it during COVID. Like, was it not happening before COVID? I wasn't quite sure of the timing of it.
Yeah, we did create it during COVID. I had the vision to create it for many, many years. And then it was time, like with the release, Red Real Wiser was going to publish The Alchemy of Inner Work anyway, it was postponed because of COVID. Postponement of the publication of the book gave us a kind of grace period in which we were able to build the network and the platform and revamp our website, which is all something that we wanted to do, knowing that the book was coming out. But it just worked out kind of amazingly. It was like in kind of silver lining kind of way. COVID was a blessing because everything stopped and we had all this space to be able to structure a whole new, infrastructure for our work, which I was very grateful for that. Yeah. So then the community actually launched before the book came out. And now the book has been out for 6 months, and within the community, we're going to begin next month taking up the book and actually reading it together and working with the book in our monthly community meetings. So
is the community just for healers or people who identify like as acupuncturist or massage therapist, or can anybody who's interested join the community?
Lorie, you're good with me just responding to
please.
this? Please,
yeah.
As Lorie was mentioning, Peter Turner, our editor at Red Real Wiser, he really wanted that book to be accessible to lay people. And so we wrote it with that in mind. And it is, I was delighted when my sister read it and said she was getting lots out of it. It was like, great. And so the community is not just for healing practitioners, although that's the population Lorie and I have worked with for many, many, many years. And I would say the larger percentage of our community are people who have licenses to practice some kind of modality. But we wrote that book so the practitioners could share it with their patients, and the patients could then in turn become a part of the conversation. So anyone is welcome, really. Anyone's welcome. Yeah.
Nice. Well, now that my kids are back in camp, they were home all year and a half. So now that they're back in camp and they're cool, I'm like, I can like handle a Zoom. I've actually been wanting to go on, and then by the time it's happening, I'm like, I can't sit on my screen anymore. But we're all kind of zoomed. Yeah.
We're all a little bit zoomed out. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is once a month, and I think it is there's a feeling of a kind of building community there. And I think it's an hour, but I think it's going to be something that will enrich people throughout the month. It's not like you have to keep coming back on. It's more like, okay, here's a way to begin to take these tools and skills and attitudes and really open up a different filter, open up a different way to actually live your life from month to month, letting that build. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about it as a container.
Yeah, we do put up a recording, so if people can't make the meeting live, they can watch it and then engage on the platform. It's a bit like a Facebook space, only private, and there's no ads, and it's devoted to the subject of healing. So there's a feed and you can talk and exchange ideas. It's like that. Yeah.
Yeah. This kind of leads me into like this next question, which I feel like, Lorie, you have spoken about your activism throughout the years. And I feel like I kind of broached this topic with you, like, should we, yeah, we're going to talk about this. Benjamin's eyebrows just went. I never felt like an activist. I never identified as an activist. Lorie, you said you have identified strongly as an activist throughout the years. And Benjamin, I'm not sure. I would imagine that now I see you as an activist, but I'm not sure. I believe you see yourself as an activist. So yeah, I was just curious about your relationship to that word and that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lorie, go ahead.
Yeah. So I have also, as you said, Ariel, I've spoken about it, I've written about it. For me, in, you know, and the age, you know, when I came of age in the late 60s and early 70s, of course, that was the thing. I mean, I was very politicized by the time I finished my undergraduate degree. I was a feminist. I was, you know, a radical environmentalist. I was a strongly engaged in what I would see as radical change. Mm-hmm. And I spent most of my 20s in that state of radical engagement with issues that concerned me, which were at the time the environment, the proliferation of nuclear power plants at the time, misogyny, and my own experience of being limited by my identity, my gender identity at that time. So that was my 20s, and it was a really exciting time, but it was also by the later part of my 20s, I was pretty exhausted and disheartened because I felt like, you know, I've just put a decade of my life. I have no money. I'm like exhausted at, you know, 27, 28. And do I see change? You know, it was like, I was pretty impatient at the time. And that was when I actually started getting treated, you know, with my first acupuncture treatments came then. And the shift for me happened at around that time when I started to think, well, activism might not be what I thought it was. You know, even the word that we use, activism, what is that? Does that mean an outer activity, a kind of, as I was a very enraged, inflamed, young sort of approach to change? And so I started to understand that from a Taoist perspective, this idea of wu wei, doing by not doing, or a different kind of doing, might be more sustainable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think now I would say, you know, one of our sort of frontline statements in our work is that inner work leads to outer change. In other words, if I'm not doing my inner work, if I'm not healing from my own trauma, healing my ancestral traumas, it's likely that even with the best intentions, my outer work will result in more polarization, more anger, more suffering. And so for me at this point, activism is very closely aligned with inner spiritual work, you know, deep soul work that then extends itself outwardly into the world. At this point, right now, I would say that again, it's still around the idea of how do we shift consciousness itself so that people actually can start behaving in ways that create more life, more love, more joy, from an inner to an outer kind of process. So activism for me, it's still very, very present for me, but it includes a kind of non-doing, a kind of slowing down that also feels radical and important.
Yeah.
Okay, now
I'm curious too, Aria, how your relationship is changing to that word, because I sense that it is. And I don't think that I ever in my life identified consciously as an activist. I never would have said that I'm an activist. And I did very much think of it as something that meant you're out in the world protesting, you're marching, you're taking action, you're doing something. But it has shifted for me as well. You know, like over these last few months, I've been working with Denise Judo, who, you know, to develop her course on our platform, which she's calling self-care and activism. And she has very much been an activist in the outer world in that way. And she has witnessed firsthand how burned out people, you know, get. And so she developed this course to support people in taking care of themselves. And in the process of developing that course with her, I realized like the very act of taking responsibility for our own health is a statement of activism. Like to not hand all of our power over to you know, some external doctor person or the pharmaceutical industry and say, fix me, you know, make it all okay. To me at this point, I feel like that is activism, empowering ourselves to take responsibility.
yes, I love that.
That's an important activism. Yeah. And I do feel that that's what we're up to in our work. So, yeah, but I do want to hear. So how is it for you at this point?
Yeah. So I never identified as an activist, in that, like going to marches and fighting it. I don't think it was conscious that like you're just using the tools to fight you're using the tools of the patriarchy to fight the patriarchy. That's never going to work. That's kind of conscious to me now. But for me then, it was more like, I don't really want to spend my time doing that. And I don't see any outcome. I don't see any change. I felt committed to doing what was right for my family and for myself. So like having home births and choosing what was right for my kids. But I also recognize that as a place of privilege, that I was able to do that. I was able to, you know, get the education that I needed around that to make choices for my family and for myself. But now it's a little different. And I feel like because I've read like Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Mary Brown, and because I've kind of committed to, I guess I haven't called it Wu Wei, but like the stepping back and to really committing to like what I see as like the divine feminine, it's almost like I'm not going to fight the patriarchy with the patriarchy. I'm going to live in my life as if the patriarchy never even existed, which of course is like impossible, but it's like you said, like, you know, that commitment to rest and pleasure and play and fun is an act, and self-care is an act of resistance.
Yes.
So, but I do recognize the privilege in that. And so that's where I kind of come up against to like, not everybody has that privilege to, I mean, I guess we can look at the places where we're like coming up against something, but it does feel like a privilege to rest, you know?
Yes.
I think it's like,
yes,
maybe
yes,
kind of this purposeful that many people don't have that privilege.
Yes, I think that's a really, really beautifully expressed point, you know, and the way, just what you said, but at the same time, you know, I know looking at your work, even though you're coming from a place of pleasure and beauty and love, you're actually in your work by offering women alternative approaches to how they look at their own pregnancy, how they look at their own fertility. That actually is an activism. You know, and I love how you put that. You're not going to be concerned with, you know, what the patriarchy may think or not think of this way. You're cultivating something different. And I do feel that is a very important piece of work, whether we're privileged or not, we can use our privilege to actually leverage change and still do it from a place of inner peace, serenity, connection to the divine, listening for guidance. And that doesn't stop us from actually making change in the outer world. It supports change in the outer world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there certainly was a time, just a few years ago when I was reading all these books about the advent of gynecology, and I was like, oh my God, like it's taken from us. And it's like almost like you do, or I did become like so enraged in that I couldn't do my work. It was almost like if I come from a place of like rage and anger, it's not effective. Who am I going to meet there? But rather coming back and almost taking back what was stolen from us, I feel, as women and humans, really.
But I would counter that with looking at our Shen cycle, right? I mean, you're talking about the rage. I went through a decade of rage. It was also fun. I mean, it was great fun being an activist in the 70s. You were out on the street. We were doing
picture the shaved head.
Oh, I had it.
Yeah.
I did have the shaved head, and all of it. But the rage is the wood element, right? It is what gets us up. It rises us, and hopefully we can then use that wood that. I mean, I'm engaged in that right now, looking at certain issues around psychotherapy and how the sexual politics of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis and even healing in general. And I can feel the rage, but it's like we want to move that into the fire, into the contribution, into the relatedness. And I think I really see that that's what you've done. And landed in your true nature, which is this blossoming fire. It's beautiful.
Fire. I remember the day, I think Benjamin was looking at my astrological chart and said something in my 9th house. I had a lot of stuff in my 9th house, so I need to have a philosophy about my work. And I remember I kept trying to remember it, and I'm like, what's that word that you said I need to, like, I didn't even remember the word philosophy because I was so like, I don't know. And so I was ready to give up fertility work. Like I was going to move and sell my practice and wasn't interested in fertility. And I think because I had kind of been doing it like over the top, like I see it kind of from the more Western medical approach, even though it was acupuncture, it was like, let's look at tests and okay, FSH relates to heat. And then to really, kind of come into it, like the feminine of it, like what is that yin that's been missing. So thank you guys. And all of the listeners who are know me from fertility, it's like you guys have these two to thank. So
yeah, it was amazing actually, Ariel, to watch that process in you, sincerely, like to know your chart and to see the potential in it. And then to witness you go through your own process and wait for the just right timing. It was literally like watching a seed crack, and the sprout come out and then the flower bloom. And it's, it's like what the approach you're taking to the work now, there, I can see the Aryan quality in it, the Aries quality in it, the Martian quality, the sort of like it's this empowered feminine. It's a feminine that has an empowered quality to it. I'm going like this, like there's a phallic kind of quality to your feminine. And but there's also like that beautiful, like Cancer rising, like the softness and like that aspect of the feminine, like the holding and the nurturing. And so it's an integration really of your chart. You found a way, you found an outlet to bring all those pieces together, which is.
So what's the deal with the Capricorn moon? Because that's the part I'm still like, what is that? Like,
hard worker.
You're running your own business. You're like a businesswoman. You're like you're building an empire. What are you talking about?
Yeah. But it's funny to hear, Benjamin, you talking, and thinking about, what you're saying, Ariel, just remembering actually behind the scenes how many conversations we had about your process. Like, I'm thinking back when he would show me the chart and he'd be like, look at her chart. She's not living her chart. How are we going to support her?
What's it going to take to ignite that Mars and Aries? Like, what's it going to, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
I couldn't feel it. Every time I would like touch it, that's I think when I started crying, when I started to feel the Aries, I was like, I can't handle it.
Yeah.
Well, so this is what you guys do. Like for everyone else, like all of the things that didn't make sense to me in terms of like, I studied yin and yang for 10 years and I worked with yin and yang, but and the elements, but until I actually like sat in the room, it was like I couldn't feel it in my body. And even with the astrological the planets and the archetypes, like you help it, like you make it real, like you make what is just like an idea of something that sounds nice, like, yeah, that sounds beautiful, but it's like, oh, this is actually like how it is in life and in my body and in the world. And it's like you make what is abstract kind of, I guess, I don't even want to say concrete because that's like solid, but like real life and real time. So that's a real skill.
Right. Embodied. Yes.
Embodied. Yeah. Embodied in a human life. That's been an amazing, for me, watching the dance of yin and yang in a person's life, like the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the active and the receptive, however you want to name it. But watching that dance and seeing how we relate to it, either unconsciously or consciously, and how we integrate those aspects. I mean, it's in the chart, of course. There's yin signs, there's yang signs, there's yin planets, there's yang planets. So we see it in the chart as it breaks down in a person's chart. But working with those energies is it's and making it real. It's really rich. There's a lot there. There's a lot to And I would say you're doing that now, Ariel. I mean, the yin and the yang are working together in your life.
Now we just have to get it to work in my marriage too.
Well,
you're working. I'm so tough on. I mean, he's like just keeps going, and he's like, you make me work so hard, but he's coming along. So
great.
Good.
That's so
Good.
great. It's so great.
Good.
It is work. It's real work. It goes both ways, and but I think that's the alchemy. And alchemy is practice over time. It's like staying with it and cultivating those seeds. But I'm
and I think to have someone who's willing to stay with it even when it feels hard and even when it feels like it's cracking, it's like that's the goal. So
that's a beautiful I mean, that's a beautiful quality, I mean, that it is. I mean, we could go down a big rabbit hole here. I don't know if you want to. I don't know if Dory wants us to go down that rabbit hole.
Respect the boundaries.
Yeah, right.
Boundaries. But I will say this. I will say this though. Just I do think there are lots of situations where we men need our butts kicked by you women to stay in the work and to come down into our embodied feeling life. I mean, I have certainly needed that kick, and Lorie's provided it over
also an Aries.
a quadruple Aries, over 26 years. So so keep kicking its butt, Ariel.
And I totally know that's true. I know it takes this sort of yang feminine persistence to wake up the masculine in that way. But lately, I have to say, my dreams and things that I've been thinking about, and in our relationship, Benjamin, I'm also aware that there's a way that the yin, the feminine, does also need, and let me see if I can get at this. There's a way that as women, or someone experiencing the embodiment, identity as vaginal, that I have to extend myself towards the masculine, to relate to the masculine, to actually listen to what the masculine is asking of me. It's it's kind of new. It's not like I'm going to be some pussy like push-up, except when I want to be, but there's a way that I'm understanding that I need to extend myself to feel into the yang, and that's both internally with my animus, because I've had these dreams where my animus, this man in my dreams was kind of out to lunch, or was feeling drunk or lost, and I was like, oh, there's a way I have to also stretch into him and relate to him actively in order for that, gender alchemy to continue. Yeah. So it's an edge. It's a new edge. Yeah. And it's exciting. It's
Ariel, we should we can bookmark this and have another conversation. I don't know what your time is like, but I
would love to. I have time. But yeah, I set like an hour, but we can, gender alchemy, that sounds like a course I would attend.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Good.
That's definitely the next kind of that's Lorie's in my next edge of where we're going. Yeah.
Because
we got to do that.
So much around like I guess this is my world too, so I can't really speak to there not being, maybe there's stuff for men, but I feel like there's so much about like reconnecting with the feminine and reclaiming and valuing the feminine, and especially raising two boys and being married to a man. It's like, where are the resources for the men to connect with not just their inner feminine, but their healthy masculine? Like that's like,
yes.
So,
Yes.
And there are resources. There are resources out there.
Like the Mankind Project is.
Well, the Mankind Project, but even I don't have the top of my head, because we just got an email last night from a man in British Columbia who wants to have us on his podcast, and he is working with an organization, but it's I would have to email it to you, Aria. But he's working, and it looks fantastic. Like the work they're doing for men to empower healthy masculinity, it looks really, really great. Yeah.
That's really great. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people who identify as feminists feel like this kind of old way of a feminism, which was like, we hate men. And it's like, no, how do we support men and honor men and love men as they support and honor and love us? So
yes, that's beautiful. It's so important, that kind of moving towards relatedness, peace, and a kind of love affair between the yin and the yang, which is really what it's all about. But we've had a lot of repair work to do, and still have to do, internally and externally and globally. And I think, again, coming back to that question of activism, I think that the work you are doing with women around fertility and around pregnancy is part of that healing. I really do. It's part of the healing.
I did a section on connect, yin and yang and conscious coupling and polarity, and I pulled out your notes on the anima and animus.
Good.
Right. There's a chapter in the Alchemy of Inner Work on the alchemy of gender, and it's kind of it's an entry point into this topic.
It's a good entry
for sure.
Point. Yeah,
it's a good solid entry point into this conversation, and of course we'll be taking that chapter up when we get to it within the community. I feel, Ariel, there's so many points that you've brought forward. Like, I want to thank you for naming the piece around privilege, because and that feels like another, whole rabbit hole we could go down, because it's such a huge piece of the conversation as well. Taking that into consideration, our privilege, what it allows for us, and even how we can create a world where more and more people have the privilege to take on their own healing and their own, empowered care of their own health. That's a whole other conversation. So, yeah,
we can have many more. I feel like just so grateful to you, and so much love for you both. I know that my life would look completely different if not for you guys and the work you do, and the work I've done with you. So thank you. I'm feeling the love just in this Zoom call. So
yes, and the joy and the pleasure is so mutual. It's so mutual, truly. This is, I don't know, like now it's going on 35 years that I've been doing this work, and to witness, process, what we've gone through together with you, Ariel, and to come together as colleagues and as quote unquote wu-wei activists, and with radical rest as a place of, connection. It's really, really gratifying. So thank you. Thank you so much. Great.
Yeah, thank you. And whoever your audience who's listening to this, we would love for them to connect up with us in our work. It's anewpossibility.com.
Yeah, I'm going to share your website and your book.
All the stuff.
Right. So definitely. Great. Well, hopefully we can talk again soon, maybe about activism and privilege.
Yes, great. Okay.
Always love to talk to you guys.
Wonderful.
Thank you
so much.
If you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more like it, be sure to subscribe, and I hope you'll rate and review as well. To learn more about how to connect with and explore your fertility, visit wisdomofthewomb.online.com and learn more about my fertility enhancing 12-week program at fertilelikeamother.com. Thanks so much for joining.